So sorry to interrupt you guys. I know we're just talking away, which is good, but there's lots of good information we're going to get this morning. In fact, I can't wait for this class this morning. The reason why is because I'm not going to talk for the first 10, 15 minutes. That's what I'm looking forward to. So I just kind of explain a little bit what's going on. We're just looking at different questions that are arising, and what does the Bible say in regards to these questions? It's ancient solutions under modern problems, and these questions are your questions. That means that they are personal. And then if I start answering a personal question, it's going to bring up a whole bunch of different things that are in our minds and in our hearts and in our lives. And we like it. In fact, we like it because it's so personable. It's so in your face. And there are some questions that were asked from a younger person that talked about Mormonism last week. And can we date a Mormon? And then the other question that was asked, what's the difference between Mormonism and then also Christianity and those things? And so people were bringing those questions alive, and then all of a sudden I talk about them. And then as I talk about them, I'll tell you what goes on in my mind is all the stories that happened in my life during the week. And when that question was brought up, I mentioned a story about this guy, I can use his name now, but James Cottrell, and he sat down and he gave me his whole story. And in regards to, I'm not going to tell you his story, I'm going to let him tell you his story, but in regards to that topic of should we be able to date, a Mormon or marry a Mormon, and also the concept of what's the difference between Mormons and Christianity, and I said no, we shouldn't do it, and he's like, well, we ended up getting married from Mormon and Christian, and I want him to come tell his story, because when he came and told his story, what you're going to see is you're going to see the light of Christ alive. Testimonies carry so much power. James, why don't you come forward? Testimonies carry so much power, and as they carry power, you get to see who God is, and you get to see how God works. And he had so much stuff in his testimony. I'm like, you know what? You got to talk for 10 minutes. You got to talk for 12 minutes, because I can't tell your story with absolutely any justice whatsoever. But I want you to tell your story in regards to what God has done in your life, in your family, and how you came to Jesus.
All right, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And I think it's important to kind of set this up just a bit. After church, I was just so excited to meet with Mike, because I just had it in my mind. I'd like to have a coffee with him and ask him about hiking. I thought that'd be great. So I catch him, I'm like, hey, I'd love to get a coffee with you and talk about hiking. He's like, hiking? I love hiking. I'm like, I know, right? And so let's do that. He goes, I should give you my contact information. I'm like, you should. So let's do that. And so he shoots me his contact, and I'm just like, hiking Mike. He's my best friend hiking ever. I'm putting that in, and I'm ready to go. So we go out to coffee, and I kind of upgraded it to breakfast, because I'm like, this is going to be a while, and we're going to talk hiking. So we get there, and then we just chit-chat about, the regular life stuff, how many kids do you have, and do you have any pets, and, kind of on and on. And it then got to a point where it went from like that to like, so how did you meet your wife? And then I'm just like, ooh, and then I'm just like, here we go. And this is, just so you're aware, this 10, 12 minute is basically going to be like when you have a fireworks show, you have all this timeline and then the grand finale. Well, I'm giving you the grand finale because this is like, I could talk for about 4 to 6 hours on this, event that took place in my life. So, here we go. I was born and raised Latter-day Saint or LDS, Mormon, these are all terms that are used. And, I'm the last of 7 kids, surprise. That's kind of what the vibe is when you're LDS. You get that, and so I didn't really love it. It was boring. It's like 3 hours of church. Oh my gosh, it just takes so long. And I didn't really pay attention. But then in time, when I was 17 years old, I had my best friend at the time. He just talked to me, and he led me to Christ. As far as you got to understand that this is real. And I kind of paid attention to what he said, and I asked Christ to be the light in my life and in the way for me to follow. And so that was a big deal. But the problem was this. My friend wasn't a very good mentor. He was kind of young, and he even admitted, I'm not very good at that. I'm sorry, And so I'm like, I think I could do better. I think I could do better out there. I know who's got this dialed in, and it was the Mormon church, the LDS church. They know all about being on top of the game. So I went back to the LDS church and was kind of looking into that. And I went more on the premise of just wanting to know truth. I want to go in kind of like open-minded, and I wasn't just, going to be like, yes, I'm in. I wanted to take my time. And so during that, I had like an 11-month dating drama break. I'm like, I'm not dating anybody. I'm just going to really absorb my time with the Lord and just, soak it up and see, what he has for me in that time. And then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I want to meet somebody, God. Just put someone in my life that's just, good. I'm open this day. And this day was October 13th, Friday, October 13th, my lucky day. And what happened was I was in an art history class in college, and there was a handful of people in the room, maybe, 10 or so it seemed. And similar, they had a couple screens like this, and we were like looking at art history, like ancient pots and stuff. So I was sitting there all by myself, and in walks this amazing, beautiful girl. And, she's just kind of coming this way. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, this is great. And then she sat right next to me. And I'm just like, this is going to be a different class. I'm like, wow, okay, eyes open and game on. So, for what it's worth, we got together as far as we started dating. And it was kind of exciting, but we had this problem. She was Christian, and I was undetermined, kind of like on the fence, going, maybe it's Mormonism. They kind of got a good thing going on. I claimed Christ. I accepted Christ at 17, so I was kind of like neutral in a sense. I wasn't like gung ho, as far as like, oh, I'm LDS, and that's the end of that. No, I was looking. I was trying to find truth. So what happened next was we decided we got to figure out a way to do this because, we didn't want to be unequally yoked in our future. We knew that was bad. And so, and according to like 2 Corinthians, it's like 8:14, it says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. And we kind of felt that was, our future would be kind of off if we didn't be diligent to that. So she turned to a place called the Utah Lighthouse Ministries, and that was founded and ran by a gal by the name of Sandra Tanner. And she is the great-granddaughter of Brigham Young. And so she was in contact with this gal, and she was just like, we got you. We know, as far as this is a solid chance, what you need to do is follow what we give you as far as the information. This is going to be very difficult to try to save someone that you love out of Mormonism. You are like against the grain. You're swimming upstream. This is going to be very difficult. Brace yourself. But we'll pray for you, you know. And so away we go. And she brought this information to me in a kind of a really gentle way. It wasn't like a shootout, you know. It wasn't like, what about this, you know? And that it was no, you know, headbutting and fierce talk like that. It went more like, okay, let's use the premise of a true prophet. Isn't this this is the big deal here? Because, you know, Joseph Smith claims that he's a true prophet. And it's like, yeah, well, if there could be a way to like kind of undo that and find out that, you know, he doesn't, you know, have something come true, would that like be a deal breaker for you? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I mean, obviously a prophet, it has to come true. So we kind of set up a premises around Deuteronomy 18:21-22. And it says this, it says, you may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet claims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken presumptuously, so do not be alarmed. So with that, I thought that was fair. You know, it's like, okay, whatever this prophet says in the name of the Lord, it should come to pass. And we kind of established that, okay, well, if that's true, let's take like anything he says. And then would also be true like then the Book of Mormon. If he's wrong on something, would then the Book of Mormon then be false? The Pearl of Great Price, the Doctrine and Covenants, would that kind of like topple like a domino effect? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's totally fair. I mean, that's like truth wins. Yeah, I'm good with that. So what happened next was interesting. She was kind of groomed and coached to say, you know, you've got to bring out information that isn't necessarily like from the Book of Mormon. You got to kind of go a little bit deeper into something like the history of the church. You know, there's a whole entire timeline that goes along the whole entire course of this church. There's like 7. But I landed on volume 2. History of the Church, volume 2. And in it, I'll read it to you. This is one of the things that got my attention right off. And this is like February 1835 in the history of the church. I got to kind of read my faint yellow here. Okay. And it says this. Okay. God had not designed all this for nothing, but he had it in remembrance yet, and it was the will of God that those who went to Zion with the determination to lay down their lives, if necessary, should be ordained to the ministry to go forth to prune the vineyard for this last time, or the coming of the Lord, which was nigh, even 56 years should wind up the scene. I said 56 years. What was that? What was that date? It's like 1834? Well, that's 1890. And that didn't sit well with me. You know, it kind of gave me like a stomach knot. And then I had to kind of work with that. But it wasn't just like, you know, easy enough to go along with, you know, that, because you kind of like, maybe I can explain this away, or I've got my family, you know, also that's involved with this, and they love me, and if I pull away from it, I'm going to get that, you know, awkwardness, possibly. And it was extremely challenging, you know, to go through that. There's one more that I'd like to read, and this is actually in the Doctrine and Covenants. So it isn't the Book of Mormon, it's the Doctrine and Covenants. But this is the one that really got my attention. It's Doctrine and Covenants 132, and it's just the first 5 verses once I get to it. Alrighty. Okay, it's a big one. Okay. Verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, my servant Joseph, that inasmuch as you have inquired of my hand to know and understand wherein I, the Lord, justified my servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as also Moses, David, and Solomon, my servants, as touching the principle and doctrine of their having many wives and concubines. Behold, and lo, I am the Lord thy God, and will answer thee as touching this matter. Therefore, prepare thy heart to receive and obey the instructions which I am about to give you. For all those who have this law revealed unto them must obey the same. For behold, I revealed unto you a new and everlasting covenant. And if you abide not that covenant, then ye are damned. For no one can reject this covenant and be permitted to enter into my glory. This one did it. I was just like, okay, first off, if you are instructed to have many wives, why aren't you? How come you guys aren't having many wives? I mean, live it, do it, truth, right? And because it wasn't happening, I could not break myself away from it. That was just like it was like a double stomach punch and like a churning that I'm just like, okay, that's a tough one to leave alone. So what happened next was I had all this pressure in my mind. You know, it's just it's all this trying to live a life that's just perfect, you know, in the LDS church and having all this, you know, pulling away from my family and knowing that this is going to be possibly leading this eternity that was possibly amazing. But man, I can't get away from this. And what happened was I basically just I just couldn't take it anymore. As far as like I got to a point where I'll be honest with you, I ended up in the hospital because I was so stressed. I wanted to marry this girl. I mean, I literally did, but I couldn't. So, in the hospital, I was going back and forth, and I just decided, you know, as I was thinking about it, one of these, I didn't decide. Actually, I hit my head on like a wall. And I just remember just screaming, you know, because I was so frustrated. And it was in that moment, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to choose grace. Grace wins. And from that point on, I committed right back, you know, down the road of Christianity. And that from that moment, we were, you know, content and yoked equally to where we could, you know, have our lives forward. And that, to be honest with you, is the grandest, fastest grand finale that I could present to you in 12 minutes or less. So, thank you.
Thanks, James. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the other thing.
You better get your microphone.
There was one other thought I had is consequently, you know, to go back to that breakfast, we didn't talk about hiking at all. There was no mention of the word hiking It was kind of one of those things, and I felt bad. Here I am calling him out, and he was all jazzed and fired up. So I'd like to see if we, what's our schedule? We can maybe make.
But
that
you know
work.
what? You know what turned the topic from hiking to not hiking, is that your soul was searching so hard, and you didn't believe you had the answer, and you weren't going to stop until you came up with it. And my mind, as I was talking to you in the back of my mind, is that there's not going to be one single soul in hell that says, I sought God, I could never find him. And you are just seeking. That's why I had to get you up here.
Yeah.
I just had to get you up here because you struggled. You struggled with your, with your girlfriend, with your wife, with the theology. You wanted to know. All you want to know is truth. And it came.
And it was an all-out truth war. I mean, and to give you some thoughts as far as if you're looking to help somebody out, in the Mormon religion, and it's what it is I was kind of a unique card, and I'll tell you, I always say I'm a 1 in a million, and I don't know what those odds are, to be quite honest with you. It could be higher, it could be more, because it's rare, even for me to be on the fence, but to have that understanding of are you open to kind of testing all things and being okay with what could be available out there to hear some things, because sometimes they're in defensive mode all the time. They're like in the OK Corral, ready to combat. I'm ready. I know this story. I know how this goes, and that's not going to go anywhere but a fist fight or banging heads. But anyway, certainly grateful, and I'm a blessed man because of it, for my beautiful wife and my whole family that's come from it, and. I'm grateful to God.
Thanks, James. I love testimonies. Boy, what God does in people's lives, and you get all the details and the stories, and Christ is just written all over it. And as Christ is written all over it, what do you see? You see a God who's alive, and you see a God who's alive, and boy, it's fun to see a God who's alive, and it's all written around us in our stories, and we praise him for that. All right, so we're going through ancient solutions to modern problems. Again, we're just hitting questions, and I just want you to know where we're going to kind of go. Is that I'm going to be speaking this weekend, and then Pastor D is going to take the class the next 2 weekends that are going to take place. I'm going to go actually on vacation for a couple weeks as the leadership classes do the sermons, and then also D will take this discipleship class, and then we'll pick it up again in June. And when we pick it up in June, I know there's some hot topics that are out there that we're going to get to, I promise. But this is also a topic that we can run all next year if we want. I mean, just because they're personal questions, and we'll definitely get to them and work through them as we walk through it. But hopefully we'll get all the questions answered. I said I would, so we'll get all the questions answered that has been asked this year, and we'll get them done. So here we go again. Number one. How do you know what God's will is for your life? Another phenomenal question. As people are wondering, who should I marry? Where should I work? Where should I go to school? I know who wrote this question, and it is a young person who wrote this question that is ready to walk into the world. So when you want to walk into the world, you will ask that question, what is God's will for your life? Well, in the Bible, there's two different wills. God has two different wills. That are out there, that are given to us, that are granted to us. One will is called the written will. The written will says, thou shalt not, and thou shalt do. So in other words, if I'm tempted to commit adultery, I don't need to say, well, maybe I should pray about it to see if I should or not. No, it says in the Bible, thou shalt not commit adultery. I mean, it's a written will, and the will is just all over the Word of God. It is, this is the way it is. And there's no mystery. There's no mystery to any of it. Should I lie on my taxes? Because if I lie on my taxes, then I actually get more money to be able to give to the church. That's a good idea. No, I don't have to pray about that. I don't have to think about it. Thou shalt not lie, period. It's a written will. It's out there. And so you ask what the will of God is, you hand them a Bible. It says, here is the will of God. Now there's a different will that is out there. It's called a providential will. And we see that through stories in the Old Testament, and we see it even through stories in the New Testament. And the providential will is that God is in control of Joseph's life. And we see the story of Joseph. You know, what takes place in the story of Joseph? Horrible things happen to Joseph. And Joseph said, "What am I doing, God?" Well, God's up there going, "Oh boy, do I have a plan for what is going on." And you say, "There's no plan, there's no understanding, I have no idea what's taking place." And God is moving him and micromanaging him to be one of the top officials on Egypt for a purpose to save the people. It's providence. What it is God's hand is over it. God's hand is moving it. God's hand is designing it. And he has a plan. And it is a good plan. So when you look at what is God's will, you hand your Bible and say, obey it. It's God's will. But the question here they're asking is, what about this school that I should go to? What about this marriage that I should have? What should this person look like? So my answer to finding God's will would be obey the written will, then you can enjoy your providential will. See, what happens is the written will has been given to us. And when we take the written will completely seriously, it is going to unfold a life. It's going to unfold our life into a plan that God has created. And it's going to be good, or it's going to be maybe not so good. So what happens if somebody says, "I'm going to obey the written will, and whatever it says, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to make sure that I'm committed to God in reading his word, memorizing his word, embracing his word. It's going to be part of my life." If you are passionate to do that, all of a sudden you're going to be faced with a question. And what would the question be? Who do I marry? Who do I marry? Doing that is creating inside of us a decision that would be powerful and strong. So when it comes to who do I marry, you can even trust yourself. Why? Because wisdom is seeing all the corners in the large picture. And if you move into the written will and say, "I'm going to obey the written will, I'm going to follow God, it's going to be my passion, it's going to be my desires," your eyes are going to be opened up to the large picture. And you'll be able to see things. Boy, should I marry this guy? Well, he has an anger problem. A vicious anger problem. But I still think he's got this. Maybe I should just... No, that anger problem is going to be so large in your mind if you're obeying the written will of God, because God is going to take you through everything for the purpose of being able to be healthy. So there's, I'm anti-prosperity gospel. But I'll tell you what happens is that if we go into the Word and we just shove ourselves in the Word, study it, memorize it, and it's part of us, what's going to take place is we're going to make decisions in regards to that will be healthy for our life. That's just what's going to happen. You know, what is wisdom? Wisdom is making a decision when the moral rules don't apply. Well, moral rules, moral laws, 20% of decisions that we make. 80% you need to make them out of wisdom. By shoving into the 20%, we'll have wisdom to make the other percent. So definitely, when you're looking for the will of God, number one, just obey the written will, and then you can enjoy the providential will. And then you're going to look and say, "Boy, this providential will is not going very good." Well, guess what you get to do? You get to relax. Because think about Paul. Paul says, "I'm going to obey the written will," like crazy. And what does he do? He obeys the written will. And what does he do? He gets killed for it. He gets beat up for it. He gets stoned for it. He gets a thorn in his flesh for it, for obeying the written will. But yet Paul, he's what? One of the most content people in the world. I'm going to obey the written will. And as I obey the written will, something beautiful is going to take place. Something beautiful is going to happen. Even if I don't see it on this earth, people will be reading about me for the next 2,000 years. So what happens when we obey the written will? God's mind comes on us. God's heart comes on us. God's emotions everything comes on us when we obey the written will. So when you get the comments that obey the Bible, read the Bible, love the Bible, embrace the Bible, it's going to drive your life. It will send your life. It will give you wisdom. It will allow you to make the decisions that are right and that are correct. And I would throw some data to prove that as well, is that if you look at marriages that take place. This is just data. You look at marriages that takes place, you marry who you are. That's what you do. You marry who you are. And so your commitment, your passion, your drive, and your love for God's word, you're not going to take anything outside of that. You're going to see light. No, that person's going that direction. No, when this is you, you will choose who you are. And that's where couples, that's how couples get connected. So it also goes on the negative side. Have problems with drugs, have problems with drinking, have problems with, sex outside marriage, have problems with all these problems that's inside. Well, guess what? You marry who you are. So you marry the same thing. And so be the person you want to marry. That would be the strength of trying to understand God's will if you're asking the question in regards to marriage. But in regards to your job, just make decisions. Just obey God's written will and then make decisions and watch how things go and watch how things move. So what we're going to do is you guys can raise your hand and ask questions in regards to each of these that are here, but I'm not giving you a long slack time. I'm not going to say, does anybody have a question, and wait for a long time. So any of these questions that I bring up, if you have a question, just raise your hand, and then I'll just stop, and then we'll wait for your question in regards to this topic as we are working through different topics. So how do you know God's will in your life? I'd say obey the written will, then you can enjoy the providential will. Number 2, how do we live as a reflection of Christ? How do you be a traditional Christian? Another very, very good question. And what I'm trying to do with these questions is giving you fast answers. You can unpack the fast answers, but just take the fast answer at the surface and let the fast answer drive your life. If somebody asks, how do I live a life that reflects Christ, and how do you be a traditional Christian? I go right to the ultimate commandment: love God and love others. Every single time. Love God and love others. That's what I want you to do. Because if you do that, what? You're going to fulfill the whole entire law. Matthew 22:36 says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments, meaning that if you meet those 2 commandments, you will actually complete the entire law." So when you look at Christianity, it's like, okay, I want to be a good Christian. How do I be a good Christian? Ask yourself, do I love God? Ask yourself, do I love others? Because that's what a Christian looks like, is somebody that carries that. Look at number 3. How do we, as Christians, traditionally date? Very, 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 very good question that would take some time, that many people have different opinions about. And I will tell you that the opinion that you guys are doing, or the method that you're doing, is often right if you've thought about it. In other words, I'm going to try to do this to make sure Christians date this way. I'll tell you that, Dee has, when he's looking at his daughters, he has something in his mind. When my sons and my daughters date, this is the systematic way that we can move into dating, and how I want to train my daughters to date. Now, how I want to train how my sons to date, and then for me as well, I'm the same thing. It's like I'm raising 2 kids. Well, I want to train my daughters, how to date, and teach them, how to date. And right now, I'm coming from a parent's perspective, and I'll get into a young person's perspective. But from a parent's perspective, I can only give you what I did in regards to my daughters are going to date. What do I do to get, to prepare my daughters for dating? Well, number 1, when I was in the hospital, my daughters fit in the palm of my hands. And I look at it and say, one day I'm going to get rid of this girl because she's going to marry another man. I better do something about it now. So in other words, make the decision as soon as they're born. I'm going to raise this person. Why? Not to get rid of them, but they're going to make decisions in their life that are going to change and alter the course of their life. And one of the biggest decisions they're going to make is who they're going to date. So the way that I did it, and I wouldn't change the way that I did it. You can just take some of the stuff that you can that I say, and you don't have to do it the way that I did it. But the way that my wife and I put parameters is we're going to give them 2 rules. 2 rules. And we're going to raise these children in regards to 2 rules. The reason why we didn't get them 3 is because we wanted to make sure that the 2 rules were there. In other words, we didn't want them to disobey the 2 rules, because if they disobey the 2 rules, then we could be in trouble. So 2 rules, and what was the 2 rules that we raised our children with? Number 1 is don't lie. Just don't lie. Never lie to us. Whenever I speak to you, you have the truth, don't lie. So when we were raising our kids and they'd get in trouble, we would talk to our kids. Just tell us exactly what you did, and we trained our kids to make sure that the truth comes out. Therefore, we had to respond appropriately when the truth came out, even if we didn't like the truth, because we never wanted our kids to lie. That was one of the major rules that we had. And then the other rule was always talk to us. Always talk to us. Don't lie, and always talk to us. What's going on? What's going on with your emotion? What's taking place in your life? What's taking place in your school? What's happening? Let's just sit down and let's talk. And we put these 2 rules in place. And the reason why we put those 2 rules in place is because when you pull your children close to you, you get to train your child in the way that they can go. And so we started very young. Don't lie. Always talk to us. It kept conversations going. And then all of a sudden, we start moving into, the possible dating field. Now, some people set boundaries on dating. You can't date until you're 16, or you can't date until you're 18. You can't date until you're 20. Whatever those are, and that's okay. But my wife and I, we didn't set those boundaries. We said, you can date anytime you want. In fact, you can date, you date your cousin at 6 years old, which I think they're doing that, dating their cousin. Hey, I've got a boyfriend. Who? Josiah Dedera is my cousin. It's like, okay, and then my kids were saying, oh yeah, I'm going to marry Dad when I get older. Yeah, that's great. But what we're doing is we're talking about these relationships as they're walking through. And we're just consistently having these conversations as they're growing up and as they're going. So when all of a sudden it took place where they started getting crushes. In other words, junior high started to take place. Well, we know that when junior high takes place, things go in children's mind that they just don't talk about. But what did we want to do? We wanted to talk about it. So that's why I'd ask them, hey, who do you have a crush on? You have a crush on anybody? And why would you do that? Is because we want them to talk to us. 6th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I'm not going to tell my parents that I have a crush. Well, we tried to harvest it into, oh yeah, my wife would go, yeah, he's a cute looking guy, and they'd be able to talk about it. Nothing's going to happen. But, they had that freedom to talk 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And we just keep on doing that as my daughters are consistently growing up, to harvest a relationship where people are talking, where we can have them next to us, where we can know what is taking place, and we can know what is going on. And then as they grow older, and then they start dating, what takes place? Well, more so my wife than me, my daughters talk to my wife in regards to the relationship. It would look like, me and my wife laying in bed and getting a call from my daughter and says, men are absolutely crazy. What's the deal? And my wife would go, I know, I've been married to one for 25 years. And I said, what are you talking about? She just said, roll over, go to bed. I'm just talking to your daughter, But what happens is they get to work through that process. They get to make steps through that process. And my wife is well trained on how to be married to a husband, because she's been with the husband, and all the mistakes that she makes, all the mistakes that I make, all the life that we have can instantly be shared to somebody who is seeking information on an unknown area, which is, I'm dating a man that is completely and entirely different than me, that functions different. But my wife would go, oh, don't worry, I know how he functions. They're all the same, Yeah, my husband, they're all the same. So there's a training process that can be there. There's an information process that even goes on inside of a person that is dating. So if you're a parent, you can have more rules, but we only wanted those 2 to really be good. But I just want to encourage you to be so open with your kids, because so much happens in their life. And as there's so much happening in their life, who are they going to talk to? Who are they going to lean on? Who are they going to be next to? And they'll find peers if it's not the parent. So you have to open up that channel to make sure that the kids are talking to you. Now, that means that the way we respond to our kids has got to be very, very healthy. If they say something that you really don't like, I have a crush on this guy. Well, he's a creeper. You don't say that. It's like, oh, okay, that's good. Well, yeah, it's good. You just kind of work through those. You work through those things. But information is given. So the area that I would look at on how do Christians traditionally date. This is for the person who dates. A wise person listens, learns, and asks. And that's why I wanted to train that in my kids, because we wanted them to listen, learn, and ask, and harvest that inside so they'll be right next to us as we walk through life. And where do we get that? We get that from Proverbs 1, 2 through 7. For attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen, add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings of riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom. We see in that you listen, you learn, and you ask, and we need to harvest that in our children. And if you are looking into dating, young age or older age or wherever it's at, I would encourage you to listen, learn, and ask, because you are moving into an area that, it's the first time you've ever walked into this area. And it is an interesting area, we'll put it that way. I've had too many kids that I know of that have had sex education from pornography on the phone or pornography on the computer. And there's things going inside the kids, and they need to learn. They want to learn. And often the parents is the last person they will go to because they don't want to say it out loud. So a parent should be saying it out loud. A parent should be asking out loud. A parent should be bringing up the topics that the kids will not bring up, so you can have a safe harvest that is there between the parent and the child walking together. So when you're older, the child will listen, learn, and ask in that regard. So when you're looking at the person that is dating, I guess they're not numbered, but walk with a relaxed person when you date is what I would encourage you to do. What I mean by walk with a relaxed person, my wife is a relaxed person for my kids, and it's been opened up with that avenue where she's the one that works with them, walks with them, enjoys it, and is actually the relationship grows even as a result of it. Some people feel like, I don't know if I can talk to my parents about this. I would encourage you to try to talk to your parents, and if you can't, I'd encourage you to have somebody there that is strong. And the reason why is because when we date, we get absorbed into the one person. So in other words, if you have a female dating male, I raise girls, so I'm just going to talk female to male, but we can go male to female as well. If you have a female dating a male, you can get absorbed and locked into that specifically. And you have no place to share your emotions, you have no place to share your feelings, you have no place to be educated, you have no place to lean on, and all of a sudden, that person is not the quality, marriage quality. Then what are you going to do? Well, sadly to say is that they don't walk with people, so they grab a hold of that person, and that person's now their life, and they make decisions they should not be making. We have to have shoulder to shoulder as we're walking with somebody. Prayerfully, it's parents, but if it's not parents, somebody that you love, somebody that is next to you, somebody that will listen to you. Somebody will say, yeah, we had a fight, the other day with my boyfriend, and he keeps on doing this, and somebody that will speak in your life and say, you know what? He does this consistently. This is what it's going to look like. It's not going to be good. So the encouragement that it would be parents because they've gone through it. But if that relationship is not happening with parents, in fact, I tell everybody to do it with parents. If it's not happening with parents, you still can't isolate yourself to the individual that you're dating, because they're going to take you to wherever you want to go, and it gets really, really ugly, really, really fast. And you make decisions that are completely, entirely wrong. The next one is set boundaries when you date. This is what you want to do before you date. You want to set the boundaries so you don't have to, where not to cross, is to literally say, this is what we're doing. And these are the boundaries that are going to take place. And those boundaries are spoken before it ever happens. Because if there's no boundaries, then things just get fuzzy, and then you just kind of go along, and then all of a sudden, things happen. And all of a sudden, things start taking place. All of a sudden, you're too far. If you only set boundaries in your mind, you can be pushed too far. You have to set boundaries as a couple to say, this is who I am, and if you don't want to date me as a result of it, then that's fine. And those boundaries are set by you, can be set by you and your parents, whatever whatever that situation is. Again, we're talking to a lot of different people with different situations, but set those boundaries in place so you just don't get swept away into it. And then the next one, and some people might disagree with me, but don't date to get married, date to learn. That's You'll probably say, what do you mean, don't date to get married? Shouldn't we date to get married? Well, if we all of a sudden date to get married, you don't get to back out. I mean, that would be my fear. You're going to make a decision that you're going to spend the rest of your life with this person. This person's going to have your kids. This person's going to have is going to be connected as one flesh. It's the largest decision that you're going to make. Be wise in making it. And sometimes by our motto in the back of our mind, when it comes to, I'm going to date just to get married, we lock ourselves in. And when we lock ourselves in, we're not observant, we're not watching. Some people say, I won't date at all unless I am going to get married. I wouldn't suggest that. Some people say, they would suggest that, but I would not suggest that, because in a dating relationship is where you're going to know the person you're dating more than any other time. When you move from here into a romantic relationship, you're going to get to know what makes that person mad. You get to know what that person thinks. You're going to get to know that person on a level that would be a marriage level, not on a level that would be a friendship level. So in my mind, and you can disagree with me, remember, we can disagree. You guys could say, no, this is what I think should take place. I'm just saying this is what I've done. In my mind, I just tell my kids, don't date to get married. Date to learn. And if you're going to date to learn, yes, it's freedom. Yeah, I've got to get away from it because it's not working out. And no, it's not what I think should take place. And then all of a sudden they'll be able to back out and move a different direction. And we think that, breakups are really, really unhealthy. If we're going to make a huge decision in our life, no matter what we go through in regards to making that decision, in some cases. So people will say, well, are you using people? If you date to learn rather than date to get married, I'm all about the decision. There's so many people that come to my office and say, I made the wrong decision. You have a sharp time before you make an ultimate decision that's going to change the entire course of your life. The decision is where all the weight goes. In my mind, and nowhere else. It goes all on the decision. And if you start dating, and all of a sudden things start getting physical, things start getting, a whole bunch of stuff goes up, well, then make the decision. Well, I got to get out of it. Make the decision because things are going to rise. Make those decisions as you're getting closer to it. So this is what I would say, and some people would say, I'd rather go a different direction, but this is the approach that my wife and I have taken with our children, and if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change the approach because we do have kids that talk to us about everything, and it's worked out for us. But different approaches are okay as well. Any questions on that piece? Oh, you're just gonna let me talk the whole time? All right. How do you get out of sexual addiction? Great questions, because if the sexual addiction has tackled America, has tackled individuals, has tackled families, and is wiping families out, is wiping children out, is annihilating so much. So how do you get out of sexual addiction? I just wanted to make fast answers and sharp, and then feed off those answers. I'd say number one, starve it. Appetites increase when they're fed and decrease when they're not. That just obey the Word of God. Obey the Word of God. Starve it. Get away from it. If So a counselor told me this one time when my wife and I were in counseling when we were newly married, and we had an issue. We said, "Oh, we're going to go to counsel and work through the issue before we move on." And we got into a whole bunch of different talks, and we got into the talk about sexual relationship. And as we were talking, the counselor said, "I'll never forget." He says, "It takes more control when you're sexual control when you're married than even when you're not." And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm married. I have a wife. We can have sex. He's like, no, the way that you work together is you want a harmony in relationship, and you want to harvest those pieces of it. And the more that you feed it, the more that you want it, the more you desire it, and that's why we get consistently even out of whack in regards to that. So the pieces of it is to starve it, because when the appetite is fed, you want more and you want more and you want more. People that do get extremely obese, how can you get extremely obese? The way that you do it is your appetite increases as you continue to eat. So it's the same way with sex. You want to starve it, or else you want more and more and more and more. And then number 2, replace it with something better. Starve it and replace it. And you start thinking of replace it. Replace it with what? What do you replace sex with? This is what I'd say replace it with, is that sexual addiction is going to go after my children. It's going to annihilate their father for the purpose of destroying them. And the way that it does is it destroys my relationship with my wife, it destroys my relationship in my home, it destroys my relationship in my spirit, it destroys my relationship in my job, it destroys all pieces and dynamics of your relationships everywhere. That's what it's better for. That's what it's built for. So in my mind, I'm like, I need something better, stronger, more beautiful, something that's golden, something that's rich, something that's sacred. And I'd say it right there. My relationship with my wife is sacred. And I want to keep it absolutely sacred. And I'm going to make it strong, and I'm going to make it rich, because in God's plan, it topples all of the garbage that is out there. I'm going to make my children above it. That's what I'm going to replace it with. I'm going to say, I'm raising 2 souls that's going to spend an eternity somewhere. And where are they going to spend an eternity? They need a dad that is on the right game. And I'm going to invest. I'm going to work. Their dad is going to be alive. Their dad is going to be committed. Their dad is going to have integrity. Their dad is going to be strong. What you're doing is you're replacing it. Yeah, I want my wife. Yes, I want my kids. I don't want any sort of hypocrisy to take place in my life. You replace it to say there's something better out there than this craving that does nothing but destroy individuals and destroy families. It completely annihilates everything. But what else is out there? I mean, we have a King of Kings and a Lord of Lords, and we have a heaven that is right in front of us that we're walking to. You've got to find something that's bigger than it. Open our eyes. Everything's bigger than it. Everything is bigger than it. Even when it comes to sexuality, I think I mentioned this before, but what is sexuality all about? God's the one that created sex, and there's a book, Song of Solomon, that's written entirely about sex. What is it about? And the thing that it's about is that to be known is what intimacy is. To be known physically is what sex is. In fact, when all your clothes are off, what are you saying? I'm being known. And when you're saying I'm being known, then the other thing that goes into your mind is I'm going where no one else should go. I mean, that's what takes place. I mean, I'm just explaining it in graphic detail. I'm being completely known, going to an area that I should not be going. What is that pushing towards? What is that moving towards? Why is it even given to us and given us a blessing as a result of it? Because one day, and don't get warped here, but one day, we're going to see God face to face, and he will be completely and entirely known. And we're going where we should never go before. And what God consistently says is, you adulterous people, stop committing adultery in this world, because one day your King of Kings and your Lord of Lords, you will see him face to face and walk into the holies where you should not be, and it is going to be the best thing you'll ever receive in your life, the day that you see God face to face. So sexual relationship with my wife is just a foretaste of glory. It's just a foretaste of what's going to happen in my future, even when I see God. The foretaste of Rush, where he's going to be completely known. And I will be completely known. And in that process, be completely and entirely loved. See, God is the creator of these things. And as he has given us these blessings are being pushed somewhere. And it's pushed under, we are the bride of Christ. You are the bride of Christ. And one day, the bridegroom will then take their bride on a glorious day, which a wedding day is supposed to be glorious. See, all that stuff is pointing towards a direction. And it's all pointed directly and entirely towards God. Wow, I just looked at the time. It's 11:15. I better stop talking. So, looking at 5, 6, and 7. Yes, I've got more that we need to bring. I'll bring those not next week, but 2 weeks down the road. We'll bring those, and then we'll get into those other topics that are big. Thank you guys so much for listening. James, thank you so much for talking. Very, very much appreciated. We'll see you guys.
My foes are many.